All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. So excited to have you today. Thank you for joining us at Words and Pictures Festival 2021, and welcome to our keynote presentation. This is our 5th year doing Words and Pictures, and it's a celebration of local authors and illustrators that is hosted by Fort Vancouver Regional Libraries. And this is our 2nd year doing our festival completely online, and we're just so happy that you could join us for what has grown into a 2-day celebration of books and stories. My name is Mary Obler, and I am the Deputy Director of Fort Vancouver Regional Libraries. I am joined today by Rebecca Chervany, who is one of our Cascade Park Community Library staff members, and Christy Peterson, who is the brilliant author who has helped us identify and coordinate authors to participate in this festival every year. Throughout the presentation today, I hope that you will use the question and answer feature. It should be a little Q&A button somewhere on your screen, or the chat to ask questions. And we do have time saved at the end to ask those of our keynote speaker. So now I am absolutely thrilled to welcome our first 3 readers. This is a special presentation that we're doing this year. All 3 of these readers are winners of the 2020 Imagined Ink Teen Writing Contest: Anders Daly, Elizabeth Keller, and Perry Russell. Anders was going to read first, so I'm going to, or each of the writers are going to be reading a short excerpt from their writing, and we're going to start with Anders Daly. Anders will read just about anything he can get his hands on, and will write just about anything that pops into his head. He is currently writing 2 novels, 1 science fiction and 1 historical fiction, and he has plans for a 3rd, which is realistic fiction. He is in 7th grade, which leaves him with very little spare time. But in the spare time that he does have, he enjoys reading, composing songs for his various instruments, and playing soccer with his family and friends. Anders won the middle school category of Imagined Ink last year with his story, The Shadow of Silent Spring. All right, it's all you, Anders.
So hi, I'm Anders, and I will be reading my Imagined Ink story from last year. Quick disclaimer before I get started: there is a character in this story who is British. I am not going to attempt a British accent because I just can't. So here we go. This is The Shadow of Silent Spring. Our story begins with a small spring deep in the Gifford Pinchot National Forest. A velociraptor stalks an Archaeopteryx as water laps at the predator's claws. The small bird-like reptile is sleeping on a branch overlooking the spring. The velociraptor sneaks closer. Closer. A twig snaps. The Archaeopteryx awakens and flutters away. Suddenly, there is a tremendous splash as a huge dark shape rockets out of the spring, unfurling its body until it is 10 feet tall. The shape roars, its long neck staring down at the velociraptor, its neon purple eyes crackling with electricity, bearing down on the small creature. A few 100 million seasons roll by. The dinosaurs are gone, and North America has broken away from Pangaea and formed its own continent. The spring, now named Silent Spring, is still lapping water at the feet of passers-by, but it is different from the other nearby springs. At all the other springs, the air sounds of birdsong and rustling leaves, and animals come from miles around to drink the crystal clear water. But Silent Spring is completely and utterly silent and seemingly devoid of life. There is something in the air there, some sort of tension, that makes all visitors stay away. No deer come to drink the clean water. No mosquitoes lay their eggs there. There is a hiking trail, but it is in great need of maintenance. It is eerie, nothing dares make noise. One cool September day, a bold robin decides to sing to the spring. He perches on a branch and calls out, "Tweedledee, tweedledee." Nothing happens. "Tweedledee," he sings again. "Tweedle." Before he can finish, the spring begins to rumble. The rumble morphs into a tremendous roar as the shadowy creature pulls itself up from the water. The creature beats its chest with 2 of its 6 flippers, each with 3 pointed claws. The robin stands motionless, paralyzed. The creature roars again, showing rows of razor-sharp teeth. Its neon purple eyes stare down at the robin. Its huge tail then twitches, then splashes down in a shower of water. The robin, its eyes locked with the neon purple eyes of its assailant, spreads its wings and flits down to the log to land mere inches away from the creature's face. The small bird's eyes turn a bright red, and it doesn't flinch as the creature's tongue lashes out, pulling the robin into its gaping jaws. The creature snorts before disappearing beneath the water, leaving only a circle of ripples in its place. The story of the beast, dubbed the Shadow of Silent Spring, has struck fear in the hearts of adventurers and intrigue in the minds of cryptozoologists worldwide. Yakima, Nisqually, and Puyallup people all tell stories of the shadow, often as the god of death. Yama, the Yakima god of death, as described as having the eyes the color of lightning, as tall as a tree, and lurking in the water of the creators. The Yakima depended on water from Silent Spring and had a series of rituals for buying water from Yama, including offering a plate of 5 robin's eggs while singing a traditional chant. British cryptozoologist Robert Langston was always fascinated by the shadow. With help of Yakima adventurer Kichi Keme, or Brave Thunder, he decides to see it himself. Clambering over logs and bushwhacking through thick brush, they make their way to Silent Spring. Whatever you do, don't look him in the eyes, Keme says, or he will hypnotize you. Langston nods, and they go a little faster as Silent Spring comes into view. Keme removes the dish of robin's eggs and sets it on the ground as he begins to chant. The water ripples as Yama emerges from the depths of the spring. He spots the robin's eggs and licks his lips. The tongue lashes out, but the second it touches the first egg, his electric purple eyes fade into a shade of lavender and his neck goes limp. It was as if the energy had drained from his body, Langston will later remark. The bloody thing just flopped onto a rock. Examine quickly, urges Keme. As soon as his head touches the water, he will awake, and he will be angry. Keme is right. Langston finishes his detailed sketch of Yama, and they quickly hurry away. As they load into the jeep, they hear the terrifying screeches and bellows of Yama. Langston's drawing provides the only visual evidence of the shadow, and people flock to see the drawing of the beast. Most scientists believe it is a relative of the plesiosaur, but many mysteries still remain. How many are there? Could Yama be a relative of Nessie? How long do they live? How do they reproduce? Until these questions are answered, the shadow of Silent Spring remains concealed in a shroud of mystery. The end.
Oh, wonderful. Anders, thank you so much. And I apologize for mispronouncing your name, Anders. I will not ever forget that again. Thanks so much for reading your story. That was such a treat. Our next reader is Elizabeth Keller. Elizabeth likes to write nearly anything, but she especially enjoys short stories and flash fiction. She's been writing since elementary school and is currently a junior at Interlochen Arts Academy. In her free time, she enjoys reading, baking, and spending time with friends. Elizabeth won the Best in Show category last year for her story, Desks.
Hi, everyone. This is not Desks, but this is a short fiction piece. The population of Y, Arizona is 151 on a good day. The average summer temperature is 103 degrees, average annual rainfall 3 inches. The air is cool when it blows against your face, hot when it puddles, tying itself around your ankles and rooting you firmly to the ground. Of all the people in Y, only Carolyn can fly. Carolyn lives on Coon Dock, which is not a dock. It is right next to the RV park. She has 3 taxidermied cats and only 1 tooth, and she looks to be around 25. We think Carolyn is dating Bernadette, who is from the afterlife. Bernadette can also fly, but we don't think she is human, and so she doesn't count. Bernadette is beautiful. I tried to give her my number once, and she bit me. Bernadette and Carolyn go on long flights together on full moons. The moon gets so big and wide. It, too, is beautiful. Our main attraction is Rocky Point Seafood Market. It's in a little red shack next to an overflowing trash can and an empty, unplugged refrigerator. Sometimes Bernadette will slink over to hug the refrigerator, and she'll stay there, arms wrapped around the textured plastic, for 57 minutes. Rocky Point sign is written in 3 different colors and can be seen from the RV park. Gus runs Rocky Point. He likes flannel shirts, bone spurs, and reading emails. He often brags about his fresh shrimp, though nobody knows where he gets them. Gus cannot fly. Most of Y lives in the RV park. I've never seen the inside, as I've never seen anyone enter or leave. The perimeter of the RV park smells like desert marigolds and clam chowder, and sometimes I can hear both singing and screams. Yesterday, the RV park expanded. It unfolded and unfurled, spraying dust and marigold petals hundreds of feet into the air. Everything and everyone it touched was pulverized. Carolyn ran out of her bright yellow clapboard house to stop it, unsuccessfully. Bernadette grabbed her hand, and together they pulled their taxidermied cats from the splintered wood. There were 6 cats, one more than I remembered. The RV park stopped just short of Rocky Point Seafood Market. Half the refrigerator was pulverized, and Gus was inconsolable. He shot the refrigerator right after, to put it out of its misery. As the bullet ripped through the metal, flakes of paint curled and fell to the ground. The dusting of white was beautiful, and the closest Y has ever gotten to snow. The RV park grew again this morning. It will keep growing, and it will destroy us all. Last night it got Carolyn when she was in the gift shop stealing a keychain. The Why Not Travel store sells Hawaiian shirts and cactus magnets with the keychains. It hasn't had a customer in years. The brightly painted walls crumbled around her, and I saw her standing there for a beat longer, surveying the bricks before she fell too. I did not see any blood. Bernadette did not scream. I discovered I could fly this morning. I don't know how, but the wind is no longer hot around my ankles. All around me is cool and refreshing. There are no clouds today. I just float for a little. The sun begins to set, even though it is only 1 p.m. Perhaps it is later. I've been in Y for 17 years, but not long enough to understand time. The sky is a deep eel purple with streaks of orange and red, and down below, the dark silhouettes of cacti reach toward me. I could float up into the vast expanse of desert sky and be free. The sky is so, so beautiful. The RV park shudders while I'm up in the sky. It makes a sound like a growl, but a musical one. I can faintly hear someone inside the park playing the harmonica as the park creeps closer and closer to the center of Y. If I look down, there are heaps of dust and rubble. Bernadette flew away and Carolyn is dead. Gus found a pickup truck in a ditch and pushed it all the way to Rocky Point. He loaded the refrigerator carcass into the back and covered it with a bedsheet. He told me he'll leave Y the first thing tomorrow morning. He hugged me and gave me a bucket of shrimp. Behind him, the RV park rumbled. Soon I will float back down to Y, to the bright paintings on the side of the Why Not Travel store, to Gus weeping over the refrigerator, and to Carolyn's taxidermy cats, waiting futilely for her to return. I'll visit the chicken coop out in the desert, the one surrounded by flowers and frog statues and little lanterns. I'll sit there, eat Rocky Point shrimp, and wait for the RV park to find me. Y too is beautiful. Thank you.
Wow, Elizabeth, thank you so much. I really appreciate you reading that for us. And now I really want to read your story Desks that won last year. So thank you so much. Up next, we have Perry Russell. Perry is a high school junior from Vancouver, Washington, who likes to watch superhero movies, eat peanut butter banana waffles, and psychoanalyze book characters with her 5 siblings. Over quarantine, she entered the Imagine Inc. writing contest and was excited to find out that her story won one of the categories. Elizabeth won the Special Librarian's Choice Award in last year's Imagine Inc. contest for her short story, Class 14. All right, it's all you, Perry.
Yeah, this is not Class 14 either. I have a paper copy, so I might have some trouble turning the pages. Okay. All right, this is us. This is our car. Yep. No. What? I'm not going in there. Faven glanced down at the strong girl. What's wrong? He asked. His hand was already wrapped around the sliding door's handle, but seeing the look on her face. Her jaw was locked so tight it shook. Her eyes were pinched with fear. Something was seriously bothering her. It sent a cold wave of nerves washing through Faven's stomach. He hastily let go of the door and backed up. Why can't we go in? She gave him a sharp, meaningful look. This is car 13. Yeah, I know. Faven glanced around apprehensively, checking the corners and rails of the platform they were on, searching for what it was that demanded so much precaution. I mean... He began rifling through his pockets. That's what the ticket said. The strong girl whipped around to face him. You knew our seats were here? Why? Faven asked. What's the problem? You... An uncertain look crossed over her face, and she pointed insistently at the door, as if that should have made him understand. You don't know? He blinked. What? Was there something wrong with this car? Did it have rats? Oh, he hoped not. It doesn't have a pest problem, does it? He asked. No. Oh, thank goodness. It's... What? She opened her mouth, closed it. The longer her silence lasted, the redder her freckled face got. Are the windows cracked? Faven guessed, pulling anxiously on the strap of his duffel. Is there no heater? Does it smell really awful? Did they keep all the trouble passengers in there? No, none of those. Then what? Had he made a really terrible mistake in taking these tickets? Come to think of it, the well-aged man who had given them to him had been fuming about the seating too. That car. He had called it that car. What did that mean? Faven's supermassive dinner suddenly didn't sit so comfortably against the walls of his gut. It's what? It's haunted, she exclaimed, face burning. Car 13 was haunted? Haunted. Oh, okay. The ball dropped. Faven groaned. Oh, great. You're one of those superstitious types. The strong girl bristled at the scorn in his voice, her face already a speckled strawberry of embarrassment. She squared her jaw defensively, snapping it up at an angle so sharp the glare that rode on it could have stabbed clean through Faven's skull. He ignored it. Come on, he sighed, approaching the car door once again and waving her forward beside him. Let's go in. No. Suddenly, the strong girl's hand was locked around his wrist, stopping him in place as he reached for the handle. As always, her voice was low and deep, and her face was hard, but there was no hiding the genuine alarm swimming through her eyes. I told you, it's haunted. Faven cocked an eyebrow. I hate to break it to you, but ghosts aren't real. Sure, he lived in a world of magic. Brothers-in-law could light candles by the snaps of their fingers, cursed drawings could steal his talents, and he himself could refill the ink in empty pens with just a thought over and over until the sun went down. But ghosts did not exist. They just didn't. To believe that they could was crazy and childish. It's haunted, she repeated yet again, staunchly unwilling to let him pass. Right, he sighed. You don't want to go in there. Speak for yourself. It's cold out here. Faven wrinkled his nose bitterly. Besides, where else are we supposed to go? The whole rest of the train is full. It's this car or nowhere. She bit her lip. She knew it was true, and when Faven tried to tug his wrist away, she reluctantly allowed it to jostle out of her grip. To him, that was as good as being granted her blessing, since he suspected that she could have held him rigid with nothing but the might of her pinky finger if she wanted. He grasped the door handle, sensing her brace herself behind him, and slid the portal open. A wave of cold air blew out, even colder than the wind whirling along the outside of the train. It washed over Faven's face and rustled the strong girl's hair, gentle yet icy. So the heater was broken. Great. He turned toward her cheerfully. Possessed yet? That's not funny, she growled, shoving past him, the first to set foot in the car. People have died here. He stuck out his jaw, a little annoyed that she had gone in ahead of him after making such a big fuss. Yeah, he drawled, shrugging his duffel higher up his shoulder and stepping in. Uh-huh. If his sarcasm were grape juice, it would have been leaving permanent stains on the carpet. He clicked the door shut with a throw of his arm and turned around, making his first observation of the car. The first thing that struck him was how different it was from all the others they had crossed through. A typical WizardWiki Express car had several rows of plush, comfortable benches all facing forwards in two columns, with an aisle stretching through the middle. This one was nothing like that. By comparison, it was so empty. One long, continuous seat wrapped around the perimeter of the walls, broken in half only by the doors on either end. Each side had its own miniature plaque embedded in the wood above the backrest. One was etched with the label A1, the other with A2. The only other thing there was a large ring of what looked like black ash. in the center of the floor. No, wait, it was moving. It almost looked like beetles? What is that? Fabian wondered aloud, taking a curious step towards the ring. As soon as he did, the temperature in the car seemed to drop another 10 degrees. The change so sudden he choked. A rocket of steam billowed out of his mouth. The strong girl staggered back beside him, a veil of white fog masking her face, and went as still as a corpse. The long, blackened figure of a man had just risen out of the center of the floor, and it grinned. Hello, passengers. The end.
Wow, thank you. If you didn't have a chance, each of you, while you were reading, the comments were just filling up with really positive remarks from our audience. So thank you so much for reading today. All three of you, you really are just wonderful writers. We're so excited to have you here and to feature you today. So yes, thank you so much. So now it is my pleasure to introduce Christy Peterson, who is, as I mentioned before, one of the driving forces behind Words and Pictures. And in addition to her work with Words and Pictures, Christy has written more than 40 nonfiction books and articles for young readers. Her book, Into the Deep: Science, Technology, and the Quest to Save the Ocean, is a 2021 Washington State Book Awards finalist. And then Earth Day and the environmental movement standing up for the earth was included in the 2021 edition of the Bank Street College of Education's Best Children's Books of the Year. Her most recent titles are the Sesame Street Friends Around the World series and the Crayola Creature Colors series, both from Learner Publications. And I'm going to let Christy introduce our keynote speaker this afternoon.
Thank you. I have a helper. I am super excited that Laura is going to be doing our keynote this year. We first met a few years ago when she was doing Words and Pictures when we were still in person. And I think the thing that I was so excited about with her work, besides just the fact that Forest Avenue is a very lovely press and puts out some amazing books, is her efforts to build community with Main Street. And I hope maybe she'll talk about something along those lines at some point, but just her ability to work in the writing community and nurture writers. And I just felt like in the times that we're having and the struggles that everybody is having, that she would be a great person to come and do our keynote today. When we first got the opportunity to do the keynote last year, we kind of came up with the idea of books saving the world because we're all sitting home feeling kind of helpless. And we realized that even though initially we were kind of joking around about it, that it touched on some things that actually really did matter, and maybe some insecurities about being writers or readers in the world, and what kind of difference that really makes. And so I'm super excited to introduce Laura. I'm super excited to tell you that her debut novel is coming out next spring, and so be watching for that. And thank you for being with us today, Laura.
Thank you so much, Christy, for the great introduction. Thank you to the three students who just read their amazing pieces. I'm so grateful to Christy and the Fort Vancouver Regional Library System for hosting me as this year's Words and Pictures keynote speaker. And thank you all for coming today. We are living in desperately challenging times. Today, I'm going to talk about the transformative power of literature and how acts of joy, writing and reading in particular, are essential to mental health and well-being, especially during a global pandemic. Even things that should feel easy right now are imbued with dread, anxiety, and the possibility of unexpected surprises or even tragedies. I felt something similar after the 2016 election. I spent months getting frustrated with myself and my really narrow skill set. My life's path has one focus: literature. How could I, the book person, do anything to change the world? What good did publishing a novel do to fight lies and active racism? These worries stopped me, held me on the sidelines, making me less effective and nearly reducing me to silence. Eventually, I found ways to show up, use my voice, and donate to causes I believed in, but the shame didn't quite go away. Of all the possible ways I could help make the world a better place, I had chosen books. Other people, I felt certain, were doing so much more than me. They were living in the real world while I kept dawdling in the imaginary. My primary way of interacting with reality is building escape routes as a novelist and publisher, instead of, say, working for a nonprofit or taking to the streets every night to protest. I look back now and I see that in 2016, I hadn't yet come to terms with my neurodivergence and chronic health issues. So the questions were especially loaded with frustration. Underlying my self-doubt around choosing a career in books was the knowledge I didn't want to admit. I wasn't as healthy or as physically capable as most people. Then came the pandemic. Many artists and writers started talking and thinking about the value of our work, whether in the face of a deadly disease, our words and our art are enough. I had tapped into these conversations before, sharing my own frustrations and limitations, but now we were asking these questions during a deadly pandemic. And how can you measure anything against the ache of loss? Sari Botten, in her new Catapult column, How's the Writing Going?, said it this way in a recent interview with Michael Seidlinger. Sari wrote, in the past 18 or so months, as we've been living through a pandemic and political unrest, more and more writers seem to be voicing certain anxieties. I know for me, in addition to the sense of terror that's paralyzed me, there's also a sense of, what's the point? Who cares about my memoir? Why bother writing it? It's a big crisis of faith. Think about Sari's words for a moment. Who cares about my memoir, she writes, and what's the point? She's really asking, who cares about my story? Those of you who are writers might be nodding your heads right now. I've definitely thought similar things countless times while working on my novels. Rejection only makes it harder. As a book publisher, I know finding the right home for a piece, especially a full-length manuscript, is a matter of matchmaking and connecting with an editor who understands your story and why it's important. But even though I have this perspective, it doesn't take the sting out when a submission I hoped might garner a yes comes back as a form rejection, or worse, no response at all. I'll add that I found it hard identifying as a writer in the before times too, whenever I made the decision to prioritize writing over, say, doing the dishes or catching up on laundry. I felt lingering tendrils of guilt. And anytime I did the research to submit, whether to an agent, a small press publisher, or a literary journal, and my work didn't get chosen, it felt like another reason why I should be doing the dishes, or getting the oil changed, or whatever organized and practical people do with their time. I'm not really sure. After all, if nobody wants my essay or article or novel, why am I writing? Shouldn't I reprioritize? Or as Sari Botten put it, what's the point? What I'm about to tell you is my answer to these questions. It's the because that drives me, that keeps me doing the work. Despite my doubts and struggles around prioritizing creativity, writing and reading do matter. Books can save the world because they can save us one at a time. For starters, it's been widely researched and documented that reading creates empathy. Here's the journalist Megan Schmidt discussing this phenomenon in Discover magazine. She writes, fiction has the capacity to transport you into another character's mind, allowing you to see and feel what they do. This can expose us to life circumstances that are very different from our own. Through fiction, we can experience the world as another gender, ethnicity, culture, sexuality, profession, or age. Words on a page can introduce us to what it's like to lose a child, be swept up in a war, be born into poverty, or leave home and immigrate to a new country. And taken together, this can influence how we relate to others in the real world. I love that quote. As a book publisher, I've chosen novels by authors whose lived experiences are very different than mine, and I've gotten to work with their words as an editor and as a champion. It's taught me so much about the power of literature and also about myself. Ari Honorvar, one of the authors I've published at Forest Avenue Press, is an Iranian refugee. She has dedicated her life to helping other refugees through dance and her work with the nonprofit Yente Unida. Ari lived through wartime as a child in Iran. then immigrated to the United States as an unaccompanied minor. Her debut novel, A Girl Called Rumi, came out from my publishing house, Forest Avenue, last month. In her Yes magazine article, When Savoring a Pleasant Moment is a Radical Act, Ari writes, during the 8-year Iran-Iraq war, which killed over 1 million people, life was far from joyful. We Iranians had become accustomed to daily funerals, food rations, political oppression, and an ongoing threat of bombs and missiles. On top of that, consuming alcohol, dancing, and playing non-sanctioned music had suddenly become illegal under the post-revolution laws. I think a lot of people reading this paragraph would focus on the oppression, but then Ari goes on, and this is what I want to talk about today. She says, but even with these external challenges, I observed a few adults' ability to become scrappy and use all available resources for the essential task of nurturing joy, stability, and a sense of humor. Faced with food rationing, they experimented with new recipes. Faced with wartime blackouts, they told stories and recited poems. As the threat of bombing loomed, they told jokes and made everyone laugh until our eyes watered. Sure, this made us all feel better in the moment, but what research is discovering is that joy and laughter are essential for building the superpower of resilience and even boosting our immunity and overall health. This article of Ari's came out in May 2020 during the still early days of the pandemic. I had been working on publishing A Girl Called Rumi for about 6 months by then. And I had learned a lot from Ari about overcoming adversity, the power of storytelling, and also being kind to yourself. But after I read this essay of hers about joy, helping us be more resilient, that's when I really started letting go of my reservations and self-doubts around my chosen life path. Slowly, I opened myself up to the possibility that books weren't just some side project that had happened to turn into my life's work, but that they were part of, as Ari puts it, building the superpower of resilience and even boosting our immunity and overall health. Words can make people laugh. They can distract us from difficult situations. They can throw open windows to the human condition that we might not have even noticed before encountering a character or a culture on the page. They can help us, the writers, process our experiences and learn how our brains work. They can help us, the readers, see the world through a different lens. My debut novel, Singing Lessons for the Stylish Canary, comes out next April from Lanternfish Press, an independent publishing house in Philadelphia. Writing it carried me through 15 years of immense personal change from my 30s to my mid-40s. From being a career journalist to being a mom and founding my own publishing company. The creation story of this novel is bound up in my oldest daughter's medically difficult childhood. During her first 5 years, she struggled to gain weight. She had 9 specialists. My life was consumed with doctor's appointments and anxiety and exhaustion. I didn't know if I'd have anywhere near a normal life again. But when I was up at 2 o'clock in the morning with a wailing baby who was malabsorbing my milk, or a few years later with a toddler who was still failing to thrive, I took refuge in the fictional world in my head, the one I could control. Singing Lessons for the Stylish Canary is set in a 19th century magical version of Microcosm, a real French village known for music boxes and lace. The particular instrument they made in this particular village was known as a serenette. It's actually a small barrel organ with bellows and pipes, and it's very high pitched like a piccolo. Each serenette had a C-shaped crank, and when the crank was turned very fast by the player, the music sounded like birdsong. Serenettes were used to train canaries how to sing popular songs instead of their own innate melodies. The customers for these handmade barrel organs were wealthy women in the United States who then hired male servants to do the cranking. Isn't that delightful and odd and full of potential storytelling about gender and self-expression? The men make the instruments and turn the cranks. The women have the financial power and decide which tunes to teach their birds. My protagonist, Henri, is born into one of these serenette craftsman families, but he'd rather be making bobbin lace with the girls in the village. For Henri, like for many of us, growing up is a push-pull between what his family wants and who he really is. I created and tweaked my character's path when I couldn't foresee what my daughter's future would bring, or if we'd ever go a week without a doctor's appointment. For a while, a really, really long while, in fact, I got mired in the middle of the manuscript, trying different ideas out for honoree while taking care of my child in the real world, where things weren't magical or safe. I'll remind you of this quote of Ari Honovar's here, but even with these external challenges, I observed a few adults' ability to become scrappy and use all available resources for the essential task of nurturing joy, stability, and a sense of humor. I think that's what writing singing lessons did for me during those scary medical years with my daughter. Although I don't share Ari's experience of war and oppression, what I relate to is the idea of creativity as an antidote to sheer terror. As a mom of a medically challenged child, there's no other choice but to press on, to hug and love your baby. I had to be scrappy. Well, in my head, I created an alternate reality full of whimsy and beauty. In thinking about this theme of books saving the world by uplifting and consoling their writers and readers, I suddenly realized my debut novel is populated with babies who are difficult at birth, but they survive to become their own fiercely independent humans. I was, I think, writing a future for my daughter, the one I wanted for her, the one I was afraid might not come at all. There's also a baby who doesn't survive in my novel, and the loss echoes through the remaining pages. For a while, I tried to give that absent baby a voice as a ghost, not wanting her to disappear entirely. I even tried positioning her as the novel's narrator, but that didn't work at all. The structure fell apart when I tried it. But all those imagined babies, the ones who made it and the one who didn't, helped me process my worries so I could be there for my real child, the one in my lap. And now that fictional world I built in my head is about to become a real object, a book in the world, where readers might find refuge from their realities. My agent submitted it to publishing houses pre-pandemic, and the rejections were polite, complimentary, and kind. So my agent and I didn't lose hope. But there was a recurring sense of the book not being necessary to readers' lives at that point in time. Honestly, I'm not surprised that Singing Lessons found its perfect home during the pandemic. It's a feel-good book, a joyful and gentle book. It celebrates creativity and innovation. For those of you in the room who are novelists, before Singing Lessons, before motherhood, I wrote and revised 2 other complete manuscripts. I crafted a small town Oregon novel in my first few years living here, 3,000 miles away from my New Jersey home. Every Wednesday afternoon, I left my Sherwood newspaper job early to travel across the river to the Pinewood Table, where authors Stephen Allred and Joanna Rose coached writers through the making and revising of their work. While I had always been the kind of person to lose herself in a career, to give everything to my job, my Wednesday Pinewood Table sessions kept me anchored in what I loved, in studying how sentences work, in the invention of another reality. At the newspaper, I spent all week making calls and capturing quotes, feeling the stress of deadline rush through my body. But every Wednesday, I'd leave the office with a handful of pages of my creative writing to share with my mentors and the other group members. That time, unhinged from the workplace, became my ballast, the center point around which the rest of my life was balanced. That novel never got published, but it earned me an agent. And in writing it, I grew into my identity as someone who lived in Oregon. I made friends with other writers and built a life centered around my creative work, not just my job. The people I met at the Pinewood Table have become some of my dearest friends. That was also the novel that got me through some of the loneliest days of my life after moving to the West Coast and not knowing anyone beside my roommate. I could spend time with my characters and feel less alone. I wrote another novel to help process my traumatic 2-year stint as a managing editor of a weekly newspaper on the Oregon coast, but also, even though I didn't see it then, to think through my own neurodivergence. That one didn't sell either, because editors found my protagonist too immature for her age. She wanted desperately to fit in with her roommates, but so often she felt left behind by them, like I always did. Looking back at these 2 failed manuscripts, I see how much they gave me. My novels were there for me as comfort and solace in a way I didn't yet know how to be for myself. And in writing them, I tapped into a deep well of resilience that sustained me while giving myself a new perspective on my past. Earlier, I said that reading Ari's essay about creativity being healing helped me shift my perspective. And it did, but not right away, not when I first read it, because at the time it was published, I was in deep grief. In April 2020, a month before Ari's essay appeared in Yes magazine, I lost my best friend from 5th grade, Dr. Priya Khanna, to COVID. Her father died 8 days later in the same New Jersey hospital, but a different wing. He had been admitted to the ICU when they still had space, and then he was intubated before knowing his daughter was admitted in a second makeshift ICU in the same hospital. I felt horrifically powerless and far away here in Oregon. Priya's other 2 best friends who still live in New Jersey texted me updates. One was there when the ambulance came to take her to the hospital. The day Priya, the physician, became a patient in an overstressed, under-provisioned crisis situation. I didn't find solace in anything for weeks after receiving the text that Priya had lost her fight with COVID. I couldn't write. I couldn't concentrate on reading. That's where I was when Ari's essay on joy and resilience was published. And it stuck with me. I wasn't ready to process it yet, not in the ways I'm sharing with you today, but I still held on to it like a cartoon character gripping a pole in a storm. I couldn't find my feet. I was barely holding on, but this idea of art as a way to get through trauma stuck somewhere deep inside me. Thank goodness I have Ari in my life because I really needed her kindness and wisdom as I journeyed through the grief tunnel. Her words had so much to teach me. She had so much to teach me. In her novel, A Girl Called Rumi, it's poetry and storytelling that do the most healing, that create actual magic. In working with Ari, I started acknowledging the ways I had leaned away from my strengths, even minimized the importance of writing to my mental health and well-being. By asking what's the point about my own creative process, I had been ignoring how much doing the work brings me clarity and comfort. I kept thinking in those early days of COVID about how unfair it was for Priya and her father to get so sick and die. Reading the international news reports about their deaths didn't make it any better. Their story appeared in The Guardian, The New York Times, ABC News, and Kaiser's Lost on the Front Lines feature. Until I read the Guardian piece, I didn't know about the conditions of the hospital, how overcrowded it was. I didn't know about the last time Priya's mother and father got to see each other, or about how one of Priya's patients coughed on her, and then she got sick. Before Priya was hospitalized, I'd signed up for a virtual walk on the Camino, guided by a travel writer friend. Pilgrims walk the route in real life to attain clarity and perspective. I've never participated in something like that physically, or even considered it, because of my constant pain and connective tissue disorder. But this virtual event seemed like as good a way as any to move forward while a major new virus ravaged community after community. In lieu of walking the route, I walked around the block and climbed up and down some stairs. But mostly I just read the material and responded in journal entry form. After Priya died, these notes turned into a record of my grief and how losing my best friend changed my worldview. On April 13th, the morning I woke up to the news of her death, I wrote, "I know I was a good friend to her, but today I am forgiving myself for not being a better friend." On April 19th, just 6 days later, I wrote, "I can imagine bringing my life path back to deeper, thoughtful times, less social media, more handicrafts and time with the people in my life, handwritten cards, long emails too, connection. Books are one way to connect, but not the only way. I can write for an audience of one." I hear Ari's influence in there, don't you? Her sureness about how story and creativity really do matter. Ari's sureness was guiding me just a week after Priya's passing, and in the following weeks and months, I fully leaned into this approach, focused my life on slowing down. I was writing letters obsessively to faraway friends, and even got quoted in the New York Times about how snail mail was helping me get through grief. Here's another journal passage from that same time. I felt so much grace and goodness in the past few days at my parents' house, sitting in the yard, watching dogwood petals fall, talking to the seed starts. I am living for birdsong and changes in weather, not for to-do lists. I don't know how now will translate to the future, but I am taking my power into my hands and using it. I'm not waiting anymore. This, plus bare feet all the time, feels sacred. I don't think I had a specific goal in mind in that moment when I wrote, I'm not waiting anymore. Maybe it was a little bit about no longer waiting to find a publisher for my music box novel, and instead finally separating the act of creation from the business side of finding a company to invest time and money in my intellectual property. Maybe you've had that thought too, I'm not waiting anymore. We can get so caught up in daily routines and expectations, the ones we have for ourselves and the ones others put on us, that leaning forward to the future becomes our default position. We get stuck waiting for the next thing, for the go-ahead from an outside force. But then suddenly, there was no future for Priya or her father, or so many others who lost their lives to this novel virus. This is something we know, an inexorable truth about the human condition. We have a limited amount of years. We have time, and then one day it runs out. Reading and writing can pull us out of the anxiety-producing productivity focus we often slip into when considering our own mortality, which makes reading and writing radical acts of self-care. When Sari Botton asks, what's the point? And we ask ourselves, why does my story matter? We're really grappling with, what if I don't matter? During this period, in the spring of 2020, another author was teaching me about the end of life and what it means to slow down and be present with every minute, a concept that definitely connects to the importance of reading and writing, even in desperately hard times. Ramiza Koya, author of The Royal Abduls, was dying of cancer. Her debut novel was due out from my publishing house in June 2020. 6 months from when her doctor estimated she had 6 months to live. A small group of us at Forest Avenue pulled together to help with final edits, Joanna Rose, Sam Saxby, and Gigi Little in particular. We went to press with the Royal Abduls around the first of the year, not knowing a global pandemic would soon scuttle our plans for an in-person book launch at Powell's. We were slated to celebrate Ramiza's debut in person on Sunday, March 15th, and we made the difficult decision to postpone. Of course, a year and a half later, with the pandemic still raging, we never did get Ramiza to the book-themed lectern at Powell's. We never got to see her at the microphone reciting from her manuscript, receiving our applause. What did she do with her final months? Besides paperwork and spending time with family and friends and eating excellent food, Ramiza started reading Hilary Mantel's 913-page novel, The Mirror and the Light, not knowing if she would live to get through it all. She did end up reading it through to the end and loving it, thereby completing the trilogy, but the not knowing was there throughout. I'd venture that she didn't read to get to the end, she read to experience the story. I love being immersed in a book, but the act of reading is often a linear one. You start at chapter 1, then move to chapter 2, and so forth. It's a journey from beginning to end. Even poetry collections and short story collections have places where readers start, or are supposed to start, followed eventually by the movement and the moment when the last few words are discovered, taken in by the reader. But when it came to Hilary Mantel's new tome and Ramiza facing her deteriorating health, each sentence mattered. The act of reading, not finishing, mattered. Local author Didi Montgomery recently told me about her mother's last days being centered on reading as well. Didi wrote, yes, books save the world. A few months ago, as my mom lived out her last few months with me, reading at her bedside, books like Wind in the Willows and many others gave us space to laugh and enjoy each other. I love that. I remember talking to Ramiza about the pandemic and Priya's death while walking around in circles in my parents' backyard. Romisa told me that we were all suddenly experiencing the reality she had been living in for years by then as someone diagnosed with terminal cancer, not knowing what the future would hold, not knowing how much time is left. This made such a huge impression on me. The fact that Romisa chose to read, to eat delicious treats, and surround herself with beauty each day. I adjusted my life to match hers as a way to move through my grief and find my way into feeling again after the shock of so much loss. I also remember Romisa saying this might be our last phone call. And it was. We exchanged a few more voice messages, but that was our last talk. My grief for her as my friend and author became another layer of suffocating loss on top of what I was already experiencing. But in how she lived, Romisa, like Ari, taught me how to get through it. Having those two powerhouse women in my life, both of them focused on joy as a way to create resilience, kept me being present and writing through terrible times. First, those journal entries, then micro essays about parenting and grief. The essays turned into a zine titled Sad House, Parenting, Grief, and Creativity in the Coronavirus Crisis, which Microcosm published in the summer of 2020. Another Forest Avenue author, Beth Kephart, taught me that a piece of work can capture a particular time and place, hold it steady on the page. I might not have realized that if I hadn't worked closely with her on her memoir and essays, Wife, Daughter, Self. Without Beth, I might not have written Sad House. The notes that turned into the zine were very personal, but each piece kept coming back to the art of imagination. My children and I pretended pillows and cardboard into boats in the living room. We created a series of stories about Emergency Worm, a bonnet-wearing heroine who resides at the local hospital and helps patients feel less afraid. My kids and I made art together, and when I locked myself in the bathroom to sob, they knocked, wanting to reach me, wanting to help. I figured sharing those experiences in a zine, especially given the newness of the pandemic, might help other parents trying to grieve in front of their kids, kind of like how Ari and Romisa helped me. It was Microcosm editor Ellie Blue who pointed out that the whole zine was about creativity getting us through a crisis. Dancing in the rain, making collages, telling stories. Sad House is about being sad at home, but it's also about making creative strides and finding joy in the making. Once the zine went out into the world, I wrote more essays and got them accepted by publications. One piece about the immediate aftermath of Priya's passing was published in Alone Together, the COVID project edited by Jennifer Haupt and published by Central Avenue Press. The anthology just won the 2021 Washington State Book Award for nonfiction. My essay was about knitting a red cape during the days Priya was in the hospital. I'm wandering around the yard, trying to find my way and leaning into creativity as a way forward. Without me really noticing, the interplay of grief and artistic expression had become my primary theme. It took many more pandemic months to swerve back to my first love, novels. Last winter, I went to work on a 1920s manuscript I started 5 years ago. And not only did I finish it, but I hired a freelance developmental editor to give me notes, and then I revised it. I have a full second draft now ready for my literary agent. And while I was working on that project, I received an offer from Lanternfish Press to publish singing lessons for the Stylish Canary. My longtime dream, after all these years, is finally coming true. Looking back, I now realize that I've always turned to books in difficult times. I've always felt more comfortable with words on the page than real people, with a few exceptions like Priya and others who know me deeply. Maybe that's true of some of you. As a young girl, especially, I lived for my visits to the local library. I didn't have to talk to the other children or play with them when I had a book on my lap. My companions came with spines, sometimes with pictures. I could choose one book off the shelf, then put it back if it didn't speak to me. Or I could fall in love with this story and then get in line to take it home. I had a kind of control and understanding within the world of books while real life escaped me. I am neurodivergent, and back then, we didn't have words for kids like me, except painfully shy, or weird, or at best, creative. None of my peers seemed to understand that I wanted to connect, yearned to understand their jokes and jabs and games. Instead of opening myself up to potential ridicule by asking for inclusion or forcing my way in, I stayed quiet and listened from the corner. Learned, studied what seemed so normal to everyone else so I could replicate their behavior. So I could pretend myself into a version of fitting in, if and when I ever felt brave enough. The rules of the elementary school cafeteria in particular boggled me. I hated trying to figure out where to sit. And then once I got through that hurdle, the milk lady handed out cartons with missing kids' pictures on them. I sat quietly eating my sandwich, staring at one lost face after another, day after day, telling myself stories about where those children might have gone and what their happy endings might be. I wanted them all to be safe. Eventually, around 3rd grade, my mother relented and picked me up from school so I could have lunch in the kitchen at home. Just me and her. No missing children on the plastic cups of milk she poured me. And I knew what to expect. Good food, my mother asking about my day, and maybe The Price is Right on the tiny TV tucked into the corner of the pantry. My mom drew me back after lunch and I rejoined the other kids in my classroom as if I had never been gone. Always, as a child, when I had a book in my hand, whether at school or waiting for my ride home, or at the playground, or even outside in my yard when other kids walked by talking, I could stay immersed in a world where an author had set the rules. The conversations were already decided, printed on the page. Each of the protagonist's decisions would turn out well, or not. I didn't have to worry, though. I could just read and see what happened next. I didn't have language then for these feelings any more than I had language for how I was different, or why school made me feel the kind of lost that had me feeling kinship with abducted children on milk cartons. After all, I didn't grow up in war-torn Iran like Ari did. I wasn't a first-generation immigrant trying to live in a new society. I had a safe and loving family, food to eat, a roof over my head, and a dog who licked away my tears. Libraries, I've come to learn as an adult, were a safe space for many children who didn't have the privileges I did. Libraries saved the actual lives of some of my friends. Back then, though, I didn't realize how lucky I was, but I still found my local library to be a safe space for my ever-churning brain. I could pull a book off the shelf, open the pages, and find the kind of welcome I feared I might not get every time I had to ask a classmate, "Can I sit here?" All this to say, we can't save the world until we save ourselves. And it's joy and creativity that build resilience, that help us survive under extreme duress, that help us get through times of trauma and uncertainty, like this global pandemic we're experiencing right now. For those of us who are writers or dancers or singers or visual artists, there's something so healing in pressing our shoulders up against the work. It's a way of really sitting, or better yet, dancing with ourselves. What do we notice when we write? How does the world open up when we dance? Lately, I've been taking my dog on long walks, and I feel a kind of cracking of the surface between me and the story of the neighborhood, I guess. I see the tall sunflower still holding on, the bean trellis now empty, its climbing greens cut back because the season has ended. The dead bird, upside down with a yellow line on its tail that makes me think someone has come through with a highlighter and drawn on its feathers with precision. But I know it's just this kind of bird because I found the same kind on the path by the kitchen at my parents' house. That one was dead too. There's a story there. Has something happened to this particular species in Portland? Are these two deaths related in some way? And I don't need an answer, just the beginnings of story. It's the question that matters, the noticing. My brain snatches up the coincidence and rolls it around like sucking on a hard candy. It's a ruminative process, what happens when I'm on a walk and the world cracks open. I don't focus on what's behind me or what's next. I hear and feel and see what's here in this space. So often this fall, it's wind, how it moves, the sound of what it touches moving out of the way. And I'm thinking as I walk about bending, not breaking, like the branches that accept the wind and move with it. And I'm thinking as I walk about how this speech is supposed to reach you in your home through a computer screen, with me here in this room, not being able to interact with you there in your living room or there in your kitchen or office. It's actually a metaphor for the relationship between writer and reader, isn't it? Writers do their work, and then when they find the right editor or publisher, their words go out into the world to many people at once, who all have their own experiences of the text. Writers don't get to stand over readers' shoulders and say, I didn't mean it like that, or wasn't that funny? Now I want to return to the words I wrote in my Camino journal on April 19th, 2020. Books are one way to connect, but not the only way. I can write for an audience of one. I had always written to be read, yearning for the future goal of a book publishing deal, but grief woke me up to the fact that I've always also written for myself. And that matters most. When we strip the idea of the future away, as I learned from Hermisa, it's the act of creating the art that holds center stage. Not who sees it, or what awards it wins, or whether it finds a publisher. Your relationship to the work matters. And I'd say the same for those of you who are readers. Your relationship to the words on the page matters. Hold that as you make space for your reading. When you choose snuggling in a chair with a book over what feels like a more pressing or essential task, like dishes or getting the oil changed. Because it's there in the intersection of thoughts and brains communicating with each other, where we engage in empathy, where joy is most present, where the true magic of literature occurs. It's the connection that matters. This next April 19th has a special significance. It's the date Singing Lessons for the Stylish Canary comes out. 2 years from the day where I told myself I didn't care who was reading my work, as long as I was writing. 2 years later, my childhood dream of publication is coming true. And I had to let go of my expectations of the commercial side of art. And when I did that, I found the publisher I had been looking for. My novel may not save the world, but it saved me. And I hope its readers find joy in stepping out of their everyday responsibilities and letting go, at least for a short while, of the heaviness of their individual traumas. I know Priya would be so proud. I can't stand that she's not here to know. In our last few minutes together, I'll tell you one more story from the day of Priya's death. On the virtual Camino walk, on one particular day, we were supposed to leave something behind, to let go. I'm not very good at that. The assignment happened to fall on April 13th, the day I woke up to the news of her passing. I decided to make my own small pilgrimage to the backyard with a cute Hello Kitty charm. The kind of thing a child might attach to a zipper pull. I bought the charm for Priya. She loved Hello Kitty, but I never got around to sending it to her. I was so mad at myself during her days in the hospital for not being there at her bedside, for all the things I meant to send her, for all the things I still wanted to say. It wouldn't have taken any time at all to drop that Hello Kitty charm in an envelope and pen a cute note to go along with it. But had I done it? No. And now it was too late, and every time I looked at that charm with its purple skirt and big sweet eyes, I wanted to cry. So I carried Hello Kitty downstairs, out the back door of our daylight basement, under the walnut tree, through the arch made by the bent branches of the old apple trees, through the gate in the backyard fence, and then into the way back, which is city property, but ours to use until the city says otherwise. I looped the purple-clad Hello Kitty charm under the rusty wire fence that faces the road. It seemed like such a small, dumb thing at the time. Another reason to feel sad and ashamed. My grief was so big and I was so far away from Priya and her family in New Jersey. All I could do was make this silly gesture with a piece of plastic shaped like an overly adorable cat. I hated being 3,000 miles away. I hated feeling so powerless, but I hung the charm on the fence anyway. Then I walked back inside and didn't go back to look at it for a year. And only then, on the first anniversary of Priya's death. I still consciously avoid that part of the backyard, maybe because I haven't been back to New Jersey to see Priya's family. Avoiding plane travel, because the last thing Priya said to me was to stay safe. But I like to think of that charm having an existence of its own, like it's part of a story I've written, as if there's more happening there without me, more story, a conversation between the charm and the elements, my own small memorial that not even my family knows about. It's a story others might notice on their walks and wonder about. Hello Kitty is hard to see, hiding amid grass and weeds and branches of the resident pear tree. I'm afraid someday I'll go back there and find her missing. Someone's child might spot the charm from the sidewalk and yank it free, or the string might give way, or a bird could carry it off to a treasure-filled nest. But I did go back there while I was working on this keynote speech, not because I had planned to share this story with you, but because I had spotted a volunteer grapevine there earlier this summer. Green, round jewels dangled from healthy vines, twisting around the same fence I had tied Hello Kitty onto in 2020. I had never seen the vine before. When I ventured back there this time, I found those green globes had turned a deep purple black. They're Concords, my favorite, twined through the fence all around the Hello Kitty charm. I pulled one grape off the stem, popped it into my mouth, and savored the gush of flavor. My mouth suddenly tasted like 5th grade, grape juice popsicles made from a frozen tube of Welch's. I thought of summer tennis practices with Priya, how strong her serve was, how half the fun of tennis was walking to the court by ourselves, how grown up we felt then, how sometimes afterwards we stopped for slices of pizza. The thing about stories is that they pull us in and surprise us. They entertain us and help us cope. Laughter and joy and the taste of a ripe Concord grape can bring us back into our bodies, remind us of what's sweet, even in the most difficult of times. And as writers, when we can put that complexity, the grief and the deep burst of flavor on the page, we are making our own delight, taking the world around us and distilling it into something nobody else could have written. Something that's wholly ours, something we want to give to others, to make them understand alongside us, to say, I am here too. There's great joy in that process, even if you're writing about loss or war or a raging pandemic. I think I understand now, after these seasons of grief, why Ramiza chose to spend her precious remaining days reading a 913-page novel. Because the words brought her pleasure. There's no trick or even any grand mystery around how books can save the world. They save the world because they transport us, engage us, make us laugh. They help us with empathy, but also they save us one at a time. Us, the readers, and us, the writers. Thank you so much.
Wow, Laura, thank you so much for taking the time to share that with us today. That was incredibly moving. Thank you. I would like to open this up for questions. If anyone has any questions, feel free to put them in the chat or in the questions and answers function here on Zoom. I'll just wait a moment to see if any pop in. We're getting some lovely comments. Somebody's thanked you for your vulnerability.
Thank you so much. I don't think I could have written like that before the pandemic. I mean, what you heard in my keynote is really the journey of me as a writer in recognizing that I didn't have to hide myself or my sadness, that I could live alongside my grief and also laugh.
So one question I have, I'm curious about your writing process. I think you've expressed how some of the experiences you've had during the pandemic have helped you to unearth, you know, certain emotions, and that's helped your writing. What about your writing process has changed through the pandemic and as a result of the pandemic?
That's a great question. In the old days, back 18 months ago or so, I used to feel like I had to wait for everyone to leave the house before I could write, or I needed to go somewhere else to write. And since COVID, with my kids being underfoot, I learned how to write with my children on the couch, even next to me. I learned how to write with a dog in my lap. I learned how to write with my husband in the kitchen, making a delicious dinner. I stopped segmenting my life into now I'm going to be a writer, and here I am a mother or a journalist or a publisher. And I think the complexity of what I'm able to write now in my nonfiction is because of letting those pieces play together. I would have never chosen that, but it's turned out to be a turning point in my creative process.
Thank you. We have another question that came through. You talked about learning about and accepting your neurodivergency and chronic illness. How has that changed you as a publisher?
Well, I used to always be very pro-author and encouraging my authors to do what felt comfortable to them. But now I can speak from personal experience, and I recognize how important boundaries are. When I see writers who are having a really hard time with their work going out into the world, a lot of the time it's that rub between something so personal going out and what people expect them to do to promote that work. And so I've really stepped back and recognized, I believe all authors should receive pep talks about doing what feels good to you as an author when you're publishing your book, not trying to do everything and not trying to follow everything people say you have to do. Because if you burn out or you drop away from that ability to create resilience and joy in yourself, you're gonna be sad. And pretty soon the ride will be over, your book will be out in the world, and you'll be left feeling completely shattered or exhausted or still stressed because you're trying to continue to do all the things people say you should. So I'm very much, as a publisher, put my authors first in a way that has deepened since my understanding of myself has also deepened.
I'm going to pop on because there's a question in the chat. Is it Ramiza? Is that how you pronounce it? Someone wanted to know if she talked to you about the book that she was reading, the 900-page book, and what she shared about it.
That's a great question. She actually didn't, Gigi. Thanks a lot. She told me that she was reading it or she wanted to read it. And when we talked, by the last couple of conversations we had were so much about getting her book into the world and so much about her prognosis and if I needed anything from her. So I didn't ask her. I wish I had, I really do. But what I know is that she had read those other 2 books in the series. It's a trilogy and they're all very long. And I remember so acutely her saying, I don't know if I'll finish this. And she said, I don't even know why I'm reading this, but it just published. I think she got it right at pub date on a Tuesday and she started reading and she made it all the way through the book. and kept reading other books. I can't remember what else she read after that, but I know that she had more time and she read more.
Did you have any other questions, Mary?
Oh, well, I'm curious. I know that your new book is coming out in 2022. Is there a way that folks who want to get, make sure that they're on the list as soon as it gets published? Is there a way to pre-order or a way to get on a mailing list so they'll know?
Hooray, I love that question. I always love it when my authors are asked that question, and now it's my turn. Singing lessons for the Stylish Canary, the cover, don't tell, the cover will be released in like 2 weeks. So you all are getting a sneak peek right now. And at that point, around October 18th, I think there'll be a pre-order link going live through my publisher, Lanternfish, and then also wherever books are sold. As those of you who know me know, I'm a huge proponent of independent bookstores and libraries. So please encourage your local libraries to get copies, and please encourage your independent bookstores to bring copies into their stores. That is hugely important for writers. And then if you want to stay in tune with me, I've worked on a newsletter called The Bright Side that's focused on this journey about creativity, grief, and publishing. And it's a place where I get to talk about what it's like for me to be a publisher and a writer. My newsletters come out pretty much every other week, give or take. I'm not that particular about it because I really want to make sure I have something to say. But it's very much me. The voice you heard today on the keynote is the sound of my voice in the newsletter, I think. And you can sign up for that. Mary just dropped the link in the chat at laurastanfill.substack.com. So that's a way to keep up with me personally.
Great. Well, thank you so much. I'm not seeing any other questions, but I'll maybe drag this out a little bit in case anybody has some lingering questions that they'd like to ask.
Can I?
Yes.
Can I add a little pep talk?
Of course, please do.
For those of you who are writers in the room, keep doing it. I've been that little kid in the library. I've been that writer in 2nd grade. I started writing my first books, and I'm 45 now, and my debut novel will come out when I'm 46. And I know a lot of you who are still working on finding your debuts, and you're good. You'll get there. But what matters is the work. And I think sometimes, like I said in my keynote, when we take what we're doing on the page and try to measure it through some sort of artificial measuring device outside of us, outside of our bodies, outside of our hearts, it can really hurt. And whether that measuring stick is a rejection, or whether or not you get invited to a conference, or whether or not you've been invited to speak somewhere, it's okay. That shouldn't be how you measure your work. How you should measure your work is how you feel when you're doing it, and how you feel after it, and how you feel when you're ready to go back to it, right? Because so much of writing is persistence and just sitting down and continuing to do it. I kind of lost hope in my 1920s novel, the one I started 5 years ago, because when Singing Lessons hadn't sold, I thought, well, why should I write another novel? And again, you heard some of those themes in my speech, but it took grieving and getting to know Ari's perspective and thinking about Ramiza's choices at the end of her life to get me to think, no, I'm just going to write because that's who I am. That's what feels good to me. I'm going to just keep writing. And so I went and finished that whole draft. And while I was doing that, I got a book deal. So just saying, keep writing.
I love that. Thank you so much, Laura. That feels like a great place to end on, considering we started with some young writers, and just want to thank you so much for taking the time to share your story with us today, Laura. It was incredibly moving, and we're so grateful to have you here. Thank you to everyone who joined us today for the Words and Pictures Festival 2021 keynote, and for all of our sessions today. Please don't forget that you can buy books from many of our authors, including Laura's zine, Sad House, at vintage-books.net. And they have a link there with books from many of our authors today. We hope that you will join us tomorrow as well as Words and Pictures Festival continues. We have 10 more sessions tomorrow, including author readings from some phenomenal local authors, programs for teens in particular, and workshops for writers. So we hope that you will join us, and we thank you so much for being here today, and we hope to see you soon at the library. Thank you so much.